our prose in the mold of European model of novel, we couldn't achieve the same result as they did. So it is somewhat similar in theory as well.
Right. Take, for example, the two important, the most important idea is aesthetic itself, right? In fact, in India, we did not have the notion of aesthetics, right? Aesthetics as a philosophy of beauty or art, right? He is an 18th century product, German product, popularized by first Alexander Baumgarten and maybe first important theorist of aesthetics as a discipline is Immanuel Kant. So we find that the whole idea of aesthetic itself is a product of Western modernity, right? Uh, Enlightenment modernity, and Kant uh, has these three critiques, three important books. One is Critique of Pure Reason, Critique of Practical Reason, and Critique of Judgment. In Critique of Pure Reason, he talks about the possibilities and limitations of reason. Uh, so something that would fall under it would be mathematics and philosophy and all that. The other book is Practical Reason, where he is talking about possibilities and limitations of using reason in our ethical behavior. Instead of basing our ethical behavior on authoritarian texts or authority figures like elders or the religious books or dharma shastras and so on and so forth, we have to base our ethics on our own rationality. And how should we go about formulating rationality based ethics is the question that Kant asks in the second book, Critique of Practical Reason. And the third, Critique of Judgment, where he is talking about how to, what are the possibilities and limitations of judging something as in some way. And then he runs into the question of judging works of art, right? And he digresses into a whole new domain called aesthetics. So aesthetics as something which is cut off from ethics, philosophy, sciences itself is a modern idea. Idea that you can appreciate beauty for the sake of beauty. For example, you may not believe in the theology of Islam in order to appreciate Islamic architecture or Islamic music, for example. And you may not follow that theology as a religious person, or you may still enjoy that. Sufi music, for example. You need not be a believer in Islamic theology to enjoy or appreciate Sufi music. Now, this kind of splitting of the ethical, that is political, and philosophical and aesthetic domain is a characteristic of Enlightenment modernity. So aesthetics is a byproduct as a discipline of modernity. When we go to Indian context, because we did not have Enlightenment modernity, right? We did not have Enlightenment because we did not have the class that emerged out of the debris of feudalism, namely the bourgeoisie class, the mercantile bourgeoisie first, and then industrialized capitalist bourgeoisie of 19th century and 18th century. We didn't have that class, right? So that historical process did not happen in India. Consequently, we did not have such ideas in India, right? though we had similar ideas. So what we have in India is a Shastra tradition, right? Shastra is something like knowledge which is systematized, knowledge which has certain kind of injunctional value, which means that you're supposed to follow it. So it is not just collection of knowledge in a particular domain, but it also has a kind of normative value, which means, say for example, something like Artha Shastra, right? Which is a kind of a text which is about Artha. Artha is one of the purposes of human existence according to the Vedic Brahmanism. Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So, Arthashastra is about basically what produces wealth, and in those times, what produces wealth was land. So, how to expand your wealth, how to expand your land was, and how to govern it properly are some of the important issues of Arthashastra, right? In Kautilya's Arthashastra. So it's a collection of knowledge upon that area, but it also provides a guidelines or norms for a king to govern his kingdom. It has got that injunctional value. Similarly, you have Dharma Shastra, and we have several Dharma Shastras, and the most famous or most infamous one is the Manav Dharma Shastra or Manusmriti, which has this injunctional value that if woman commits adultery, she should be punished in this way. If man of some varna commits adultery, he should be punished in this way. If somebody steals and he belongs to this caste, then he should be punished in this way and that way. Right? So Manusmriti is a kind of knowledge, but it also has this normative value. Similarly, attempts were made to write Natya Shastra. One of the oldest available Shastra is Bharat's Natya Shastra, but he talks about Natya Shastras before him as well, which is about knowledge of how to perform, how to stage a play effectively. Right? So it is a body of knowledge, but it also has a normative value that you are supposed to follow it. Right? It's binding that you follow that Shastra. So Natya Shastra is one of the earliest texts which can be classified as the text of philosophy of art. And so Indian aesthetics by that extension. Right? So when we are using the term Indian aesthetics and discussing Bharat's Natya Shastra, there is this historical differences that have to be kept in mind rather than treating them as simple equivalents. Right? So where does it lead us? It leads us to the fact that if you want to study texts written in India after Bharat, right? That is 5th century or 3rd century or 2nd century AD or BC, we don't know. At the turn of the first millennium, then you should know this tradition. That means if you want to study Indian literature written after Bharat, you have to study Bharat. I hope you get what I'm saying. Just as to study development of theater in the West, you have to study Aristotle, right? Without which you cannot study the history of theater and narrative literature in the West, because that is a kind of book which people followed, right? Right, and it was based on analysis of existing drama in front of Aristotle, from which he derived principles of what drama is. So one of the basic reasons why we study something called Indian aesthetics is if we are interested in Indian literature, then you have to study these theories because people followed it. in some way or the other, right? Or people differed from it. But even when they differed from it, they would still consider that as a benchmark and then proceed to differ. Right. So one of the reasons why we are studying Indian aesthetics is that if you are interested in Indian literature, then you have to know these traditions of art. उसका शास्त्र है. With the emergence of new genre called kavya, right? And kavya is something that comes close to literature, but it is not. Kavya means vakyam rasatmakam kavyam, or any utterance which has got aesthetic value is called kavya, right? And kavya includes prose, it includes theater, it includes written texts of several kinds. So you have prose kavya like Dandi's Dash Kumar Charitam, written by Dandi, 6th century somewhere. You have Mahakavya like Ramayana, Adi Kavya like Ramayana. You have Kalidas plays which are also which is also Kavya. So Kavya is not equivalent to poetry. It is equivalent to Greek idea of poesis, right? Which means anything that is made of words. Made up is what Greeks talked about, poesis, right? So kavya is not equivalent to poetry, is something we have to keep in mind. In fact, we have no equivalent for word kavya in English, because literature very often implies written and printed texts. Well, kavya may include performed text like natya, right? And kavya was divided into श्राव्य काव्य and दृश्य काव्य. जो आप देखते हो तो उसे दृश्य काव्य कहते हैं, और जो आप सुनते हो पठन किया गया उसे श्राव्य काव्य कहते हैं. Something that is heard, right? So Kalidas's Meghdut would be Shravya Kavya, that which is heard, being read out, recited in the court before the king, right? But his play called Abhigyan Shakuntal would be something that would be staged in the court or nearby place. So Abhigyan Shakuntal is Drushya Kavya and Meghdut is Shravya Kavya. I hope you get the difference of the category of Kavya, how it operated. Now, why do we need to learn this? Is first that we should know the lack of equivalence because of historical differences. And secondly, if you want to study Indian literature, you have to understand these categories. If you don't understand these categories, you won't be able to study Indian literature. So this is very basic, very mundane reason for studying Indian aesthetics, which we should bear in mind, right? It is a rationale for studying Indian literature. Secondly, was something that we thought of when we were discussing comparative literature, was the notion of subtractive bilingualism that which we have imbibed through our English educational system, right? And that has deprived us of awareness and knowledge of the cultural traditions to which we belong, in which we are born and brought up, knowledge and cultural traditions, right? We don't know these traditions and we are studying something completely unrelated to our lives, right? When we study Beowulf, so for example, or you are studying Spencer's Fairy Queenie, then you're dealing with texts which are not connected to your life in any way. Milton's Paradise Lost, right? So we deal with texts which do not have direct relevance to our life, and as a result we are left in a nowhere space, right? And that can be disempowering, but it can also be used as the space of powerful negotiation, as Homi Bhabha points out in the essay on post-colonial translation, right? So you have to see these connections across curriculum that we are dealing with. Yeah. So these are some of the reasons why we are studying Indian aesthetics, right? But while studying, we always remind us that these categories are historically different and they operate differently. Anything that you have to say about this, whatever we have said, any query? Yeah, Vibha.
Sir, why Vedas is not considered as a kavya?
Because they were not Vedas. See, kavya was something that was primarily meant for aesthetic relish, right? Rasatmakam kavyam. Rasa was important aspect of. So that kind of vakya, that is vakya means anything made of words. Vak में से वाणी में से जो बनता है उसे वाक्य कहते हैं, right? And जिस वाक्य में रस हो उसे काव्य कहते हैं. Now the Vedic texts, right, are written in meters, chanda, but they are not kavya because they have a direct impact upon the world. Which means that when you are offering in a particular situation, when Vedic rituals are being done, these texts, which were called mantra, right? These mantras of Vedic texts impacted the universe. At least that was believed. कि आप एक मंत्र बोलते हो तो उसका एक फल मिलता है, right? So doing that ritual and chanting that mantra properly resulted in a fruit, right? It has a consequences on the real world. That means you could defeat your enemies, you can win women, you can win cows, you could do a lot of things with mantra, right? Because mantras were meant to please various gods, and then when you offer something in sacrifice in the yagna and chant those mantras according to a strict code, then these mantras would be effective in having material consequences for you. Now, kavya would also have some consequences, ऐसा माना जाता था, but it was not necessary, right? It was not considered at par with Vedic utterances. Now, Vedic utterances are also not created by human beings. That is another important aspect. Kavya is always created by human beings. Vibha.
Yes, sir, I'm saying that.
But Veda is apurusheya. It is always produced. It is just revealed to these rishis. It is not created by rishis. So though various rishis are associated with various mantras of the Vedas, they are not the creators, but they are the seers. Drushta hai. उन्होंने वो देखे हैं. That's why Vedic tradition is called Shruti tradition. So anything which does not have an author cannot be literature. Does that answer your question in some way?
Yes, sir.
And it was not accessible to all. Means कालिदास अगर काव्य पढ़ रहा है तो वो कोई भी सुन सकता है. मेघदूत का पठन कर रहा है तो कोई भी वर्ण, कोई भी जाति, कोई भी लिंग की व्यक्ति सुन सकती है. बट वैदिक मंत्रस and plus kavya can be recited by anyone, right? But Vedic mantras cannot be recited by anyone, only those people who are initiated into it, right? Upper caste Brahmins usually, and that is what the sacred thread ceremony was about. That means you start learning Vedic knowledge, and only they had this right. So one section of society called Dvija, or twice born people, had access to chanting of Vedic mantras, right? So the three varnas and largely males, upper caste male was the section which had ultimate right over chanting Vedic mantra, while Kavya can be for anybody by anybody. So you can see the restricted access. Anybody can sing Meghdut, but not everybody could sing Rigveda, right? Unless you have that adhikar or authority to do so.
So can we say that ki mantra and the other genres and Veda never read as a literature?
Never read as a literature. Yes, they were never read as a literature. क्योंकि वो आनंद के लिए नहीं कोई पढ़ता है, राइट? वो अगर आप चैंट करते हो तो उसमें से वेरियस देवता प्रसन्न होते हैं और आपको जो चाहिए वो देते हैं फल. ऐसे माना जाता है. Now you don't ask me ऐसे होता था क्या, ऐसे माना जाता. And that's why these texts were guarded by people. They were not even today, if you see, even today to large extent, what people of non-upper caste people have as a religion, Hinduism, is largely Puranic religion, based on Purana and what should I say, Itihas Purana traditions. That is the Smruti traditions, which were open for all varnas and castes and genders. They don't have access to the Vedic text.
But sir, there is except one similarity between Kavya and Vedas, that they are not written in ordinary language. Of course, the purpose is different, but not in
But
ordinary
Vedas
language.
are not written by anybody.
Yeah, sir.
अपुरुषेय है वेद. While साहित्य या काव्य है ना, वो पुरुषेय होता है. That is very basic. Secondly, वेद के ऊपर सिर्फ 3 वर्णों का जिन्होंने जनोई ली है उनका ही अधिकार रहता था. काव्य के ऊपर किसी का अधिकार नहीं रहता. कोई भी पढ़ सकता है, कोई भी उसे. Especially the performers of Indian theatre were largely people from lower castes, very often.
But sir, we cannot ignore the fact that Kavya written in indirect language.
हाँ, नहीं, वो तो मैं बात ही नहीं कर रहा हूँ. मैं ये बात कर रहा हूँ कि कैटेगरीज की बात हो रही है. काव्य belongs to a different category and Vedas belong to a different category, right? कैटेगरी जैसे अगर आप पूछते हो शेक्सपियर और बाइबल में क्या फर्क है, ऐसे देखो तो दोनों लिटरेचर है, पर बाइबल has a different cultural value, right? Yes, no.
Yes, sir.
एक गजल और कुरान में क्या फर्क है? Quran as a discourse is revelation of God, right? It cannot be at par with Ghalib's ghazal. I hope you get the difference.
Yes, sir.
Both at linguistic level you may say कि दोनों में features एक है, हो सकते हैं, but that is besides the point. Cultural place that a particular text occupies is very different from another. Yeah, Khadija.
सर कल्चरल एक्सपेक्ट के अलावा दोनों का पर्पस जो है वो भी तो लाइक द पर्पस ऑफ बोथ दीज टेक्स्ट डिफरेंट कंप्लीट या
फंक्शन एंड पर्पस वर वेरी डिफरेंट. एब्सोल्युटली. जैसे कि काव्य सुनते राजा खुश हो जाता था मेघदूतम सुन के, वाह वाह वाह, पर वेद के मंत्र वैसे नहीं पढ़े जाते. You have to have a proper yagna and you have to follow the entire rigorous code of chanting it in a particular way, and only few people who had particular authority to do that. Only then it would have results, consequences, and these results are believed to be actual. अगर आपको युद्ध जीतना है तो ये मंत्र पढ़ो, यज्ञ करो, अश्वमेध यज्ञ करो, one of the famous yagnas, right? So, and then that would be carried out. So, place and function of those texts differed, is what I'm saying. Vedic texts and literary texts.
So, sir, like, does Kavya have educative aspect?
It may have. It has a didactic value, but that is very different from, say, for example, Shastra. धर्मशास्त्र में का didactic value होता है, पर they have, you are supposed to follow it, right? You are supposed to follow that shastra no matter what. But काव्य में जो moral होता है, educative moral है, जैसे कि रामायण महाभारत, कोई भी काव्य में एक moral होता है, right? Is not, you are not bound to follow it. I hope you get what I'm trying to say. There is an educative value, but you're not supposed to follow it. जैसे ये करना ही पड़ेगा आपको, ऐसे नहीं है.
Yes, so that's why I'm really confused because of it. What is the difference?
So Shastra, Kavya are two worldly discourses, right? They are about world. Veda is non-human or suprahuman discourse, right? It's a different kind of discourse. The Shruti discourse. एक और discourse आप भूल जा रहे हो जो बहुत powerful है, और वो है Smruti discourse, which is इतिहास पुराण tradition discourse, right? And it is all about the stories of gods and creations and all that. So Shruti, Smruti, Shastra और काव्य ये चार categories हैं, discursive categories in India. Yeah, Rushi, you had to say something? Right, so you have to learn these discursive differences. Like, for example, Aristotle's Poetics would be one discourse, but Sophocles' plays would have a different category, right? That would be poesis, while Aristotle's discourses would be more like Shastra. Yes, anything that you have to say about what we discussed? Nobody has to say anything about what we discussed.
Sir, I have a very basic question. So, like, uh, this is all about Indian aesthetics, okay? And the major text that we are going to talk about kavyas and everything. So, like, those who are not familiar with it, how will they differentiate between the kavyas and the smriti and whatever, like the things you talked about? And also, there are texts like Gita, which is like a supreme, like primary text in Hinduism. And then there
No,
are this
it
kavyas
is
and
not.
everything. So, how?
Gita is not a supreme religious text in Hinduism. It is part
Okay,
of Itihas Puran traditions. It is part of Mahabharata, right? Which is
okay,
Kavya as
yes,
well as Itihas, right? Means it is believed to have happened. Supreme
okay.
textuality is still given to Vedic texts. But as people rightly point out, that Vedic texts are not meant for everybody. They are guarded by authority of caste and learning and gender as well, right? But Gita is open for all, and that is one of the reasons of its immense popularity. So Gita is not equivalent to Quran or the Bible. People say so, but that's not true, right? They are not equivalent. So Gita has a very important moral and philosophical dimension. But you are not bound that if you don't follow it, आपको पुलिस पकड़ जाएगी. ऐसा नहीं होगा. शास्त्र का पालन नहीं करोगे तो पुलिस आ जाती है. I hope you get that. It is still not Shastra. Right? It has got philosophical knowledge of all kinds. I hope you get it. So what your question is, coming back to your questions, how do you identify the text? ऐसे कह रहे हो कि ये किस category में आता है? Is that your questions?
Yes, sir. Like, yes, sir. Like, there are so many different texts. Like, मैंने तो सिर्फ सुना है, but I just want to ask that, do those मतलब जिनका ये text है, do they even read it like all of these, or do they also have an idea about it कि कौन सा text क्या है, किसके लिए है? क्योंकि इतने सारे हैं, तो when do they get time to read all of them? Like,
they don't read. They don't read. They enter politics and beat other people up. Right. So how do, so that's another question. When do these people read? They don't read, right? Most of the time they don't read. Secondly, how do you know? Again, so you have got two different questions. One is how to identify the discursive category, right? किस category में ये text आती है? How do you know that? That is one question number one, right?
yes, sir.
Second is when do all people read all these things? The people don't. So क्या करोगे बोलो? नहीं पढ़ते.
So like अगर नहीं
Syllabus
पढ़ते
में
तो
दिए
then
गए text भी नहीं पढ़ते लोग तो.
Attack.
So, okay. So coming back to the question number one, how to identify discursive category? Then there is something called the intention of the speaker, vivaksha, right? Vivaksha is the term used to describe what the speaker is saying, right? So the Shruti is a kind of fixed tradition. उसमें आते हैं मंत्र और ब्राह्मण. Mantra is various chants and they are put together in different texts. Rig, Atharva, Yajur or Sam. So these are the four texts, compilations of those chants, right? Now, when are they are supposed to chant them? How to chant them? Who will chant them? What is the philosophical meaning of these chants and mantra? Is part of a discourse called Brahman, right? So you have got mantra and Brahman, and Brahman is often divided into Aranyaka and Upanishad, right? Which is largely about philosophical, metaphysical speculations of all kinds about the Vedic chants, mantras, right? So you have various kinds of Upanishads. But this is more or less closed discursive universe. Right? It does. You cannot write one Upanishad today and say that I have added to it just like that. It is more or less closed. The second category is Itihas Puran, and it is called Smruti category. And that is fairly easy to identify because it tells the stories of creation and gods and goddesses and Shiv Puran, Vishnu Puran, Krishna Puran, Devi Puran, all kinds of Markandeya Puran, all kinds of Puran, right? Puran means ancient, antiquated. Purana, word Puran. So Purana, Purani Kahaniya. That is the second category, easy to identify. The third category is Shastra, which is a manual compendium of knowledge, right? And the most famous Shastras are Natya Shastra by Bharat Muni, and Artha Shastra by Kautilya, and Kam Sutra by Vatsayan. These are famous Shastras. But then you also have Dharma Shastras of all kinds, like Manusmriti, Manav Dharma Shastra, Yagnavalkya Shastra, Dharma Shastra. And these were kind of legal textbooks. And people were supposed to behave in a particular way. That if you cheat somebody of some money, then that person will go to something called Dharma Sabha, right? And Dharma Sabha were largely consisted of Brahmins who were experts in Dharma Shastra, right? And they would decide what is the kind of punishment to be given to this person for committing this crime, right? What are the kinds of evidences in the light of Dharma Shastra, right? So these are the texts which are a kind of legal text, which have some legal binding. Legal is not a very good word, but then Dharma Sabha was enforced by the Brahmins. And even during the various kinds of rules by Islamic regimes, Dharma Sabha was largely the body which gave law and justice to people, right? And it consisted of Brahmins, Dharma Sabha as it was called. And finally, Kavya. So you have Kavyas of all kinds, Kalidas, Bhas, Bhavabhuti, and whatnot. Plenty of Kavya. Yeah, so what's the question?
Okay, it's Vibha's.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my question is why Jain Puran call itself a Kavya?
Pardon?
Like why Jain Purana call itself a Kavya? Like why? Is there any similarities or they just wanted to get attention to call itself a Kavya?
Because it had features of both Itihas Purana and literary aesthetic impact, right? But even then, Itihas Puran was the major discursive strategy to which Mahabharata belongs, right? Mahabharata is Jai, right? And it is Itihas. It is primarily Itihas and later on Kavya. So it is considered Kavya, but then it is primarily Itihas.
So like I'm talking about Jain Puran.
Jain Puran?
Yes, like why Jain Puran call itself as a Kavya?
I didn't, can you repeat your question again? What is?
Like why Jain Puran call itself as a Kavya?
Jain Puran.
Yes, sir.
Now, Jainas belong to another world, discursive world. They are Avedikas, right? Also called Nastikas by some people. So Buddhists and Jains have entirely different discursive world which reject the Vedic tradition. Right? So there were constantly fights between the Jainas and the Vedikas. right? Or Bauddhas and Vedikas. So these are different discursive worlds, and they would have their own Itihas Puran, and they would have their own primary scriptures. For example, Buddhism would have its own primary scripture like Tripitik and others. And there were various different sects and subsects of Buddhism, like Mahayana and Hinayan. And in Jainism also you had several sampradayas, panths, like what were those? Digambar and Shwetambar, right? So these were several sampradayas, and they had different textual universes. So very often, for example, people like Hemchandracharya, right, would be an expert in Apabhransh and Prakrut, but also he is a Sanskrit scholar. So he uses Kavya Shastra tradition, and he talks about how a poet is to be educated in his book called Kavyanushasana. Right. So Jains would have a different set of epics. That is Itihas Puran. Unke Itihas Puran alag hai. So they would tell the same Ram story with a difference, that Ram would never kill Ravan because violence is forbidden in Jainism. So you have Lakshman killing Ravan, for example, right? So it's a different tradition, but it is still Itihas Puran tradition, and they don't follow Shruti. They don't follow the Vedic traditions. They reject it. So difference is very often category is made called Shramana tradition and Brahmana tradition. So Shramana traditions are like Jainism and Buddhism, which emphasize complete renunciation as the only way out of this samsara. Samsara is wandering from birth to rebirth. So only way out is renunciation. That's the only way out. Living good life, and then renunciation is the ultimate aim of only way out. While Brahmanas would believe in the Vedic texts, and their schema would be 4 ashrama. And 4 ashram is what? Brahmacharya ashrama and Vanaprastha ashrama and Sannyasa ashrama. Right. So life would be divided into 4 categories, where renunciation comes at the end of your life. But they reject all this Vedic Varnashram and Ashram system. So why are Jaina Purana called Kavya? They may be called Kavya, but they are still Purana, remember. Purana with aesthetic qualities, but they are still Purana. So,
but they sound like and speak like Kavya, right?
Yes. काव्य की उसमें ट्रेट्स आ सकती हैं सब में, जैसे रामायण इज महाकाव्य, राइट, बट इट इज ऑल्सो इतिहास. It is primarily इतिहास, but at the same time it has got its aesthetic value, artistic value as well. So these are the mixed genres, mixed categories. और मैं ये सब कहां से बोल रहा हूं पता है? ये मेरे टोपी में से निकाल के नहीं बोल रहा हूं, मैं ये ऐसे में से बोल रहा हूं. बाय शेल्डन पोलॉक, संस्कृत लिटरेरी कल्चर फ्रॉम इनसाइड आउट. ये एक ऐसे है, आपको प्रिस्क्राइब किया गया, उसमें से ही बोल रहा हूं. प्लीज कंसिडर दैट. So your job is to read that damned essay. Yeah. खादीजा, एग्जाम में वही आएगा. बोलो खादीजा.
Sir, so again the same question, not the same question, but ये कि all these texts and kavyas and Purans and those were written in originally in Sanskrit, right? And
Sanskrit also in Prakrit and Apabhransh.
okay, so like they were written years ago, right? और फिर तब से लगा
Centuries
के
ago.
या centuries ago, right? So तब से उनमें तो कितना ज्यादा ट्रांसलेट होके वो अभी they are available to us and like they have gone through like thousands of years और अब जाके वो हमारे पास है. So how can we say that they are like how close they are to the original text or how can we rely on them or how can we trust कि इसमें जो लिखा हुआ है that is you know original.
You have to see them as traditions rather than texts. So Itihas Purana tradition is tradition of retelling stories of past, right? So you will have Ramayana and Mahabharata being retold in almost all Indian languages, not just Indian languages, but also in Persian and Arabic and also in Chinese and Japanese and Indonesian languages. You find Ramayana and Mahabharata being retold in several ways. So these are the traditions of retelling. उसमें कोई ऐसा original एक है नहीं, you have to follow it closely. So they are not exactly translations, but re-narratives or retelling, traditions of retelling. Right? So you have to get that. So you have Ramayana and Mahabharata in Gujarati, Marathi,
But then
and
sir,
Bangla,
Ramayana
Yeah.
and महाभारत में भी there are so many like different narratives. Like किसी के अंदर कुछ और कह रहे हैं तो किसी के अंदर कुछ और कह रहा है. तो how do we like किस
कौन सा
पे
original है ऐसा?
like yeah, which one is original and which one is not? How do we know
is
that?
the question that Indians don't really bother about. What they bother about is Vedic texts can never be translated, right? Though they are translated for us, Vedic texts cannot be retold in Gujarati. Though you may use it to understand its meaning. It's like something like Quran, right? Holy Quran cannot be translated. What you can have is tarjuma of it, which is an explanation in vernaculars of what it means, right? But it's not translation as an equivalent. It is not considered equivalent. So Vedic discursive category has no equivalence because it is not creation of human being. It is expression of ultimate reality. That's first thing. Secondly, Itihas Puran traditions are traditions of retelling where there is no primary original texts, which you have to remain faithful to. Let me give you a very famous example of Mukteshwar in Marathi in 17th century, very famous narrator of Ramayana and Mahabharata. What he does that in Pandav fight not just Kaurav but also Firangis, Topikars, that is Portuguese and British and French. अब आप पूछोगे कि रामायण जब महाभारत में चल रहा है वहां पे अंग्रेज और पोर्टुगीज कहाँ से आ गए? वो तो एग्जिस्ट ही नहीं करते थे उस टाइम. But that is considered part of retelling. Retelling is always done in the context of present, right? And in his Ramayana, famous Ramayana, what Ram does is he throws certain diseases at Ravan, and those diseases include syphilis, sexually transmitted disease, जो अंग्रेज लेके आए थे इंडिया में. He throws it at Ravan, and Ravan is an expert in Ayurveda. So what he does that he devises medicines and throws it back at Ram. Now this is the earliest instance of bio warfare, right? Now it is not there in Valmiki's Ramayana at all. ये सब अपने creativity से डाला हुआ है उसमें, right? To make it more interesting for his contemporary audience. So these traditions of retelling did not involve this rigid notions of equivalences, and that is what precisely what Devi is saying in Indian theory of translation. that the idea of rigid equivalences did not exist. It was more of equivalence of memory meeting creativity. I don't know how to put it other way. So you know, everybody knows the story of Ram and Sita and Mahabharata. So everybody has a memory of it. Now this meets contemporary creativity. So when somebody is telling you this story as Akhyana, right, then that person will add something of his or her own to make it more interesting to people. I hope you get what I'm saying. So does that answer the question of what is authentic, true story of Ram or Mahabharata? That question has come up today with certain kind of nationalist politics of religion being played out. There was an essay called 300 Ramayana by P.K. Ramanujan. So read that essay, you will find it online. It was prescribed in Delhi University, but people protested against it and it was removed. So that goes back to Khadija's question. लोग पढ़ते हैं क्या? लोग पढ़ते ही नहीं, इसी वजह से तो ऐसा हो रहा है.
But then, sir, वो इतनी बड़ी like I'm not like naming someone or like that, but then they tell कि शास्त्रों में ये लिखा है या फिर इसमें ये लिखा है, उस पे बवाल करते हैं. तो what do
शास्त्र पढ़ना आता है उनको? पहले पूछना चाहिए, आपको शास्त्र पढ़ना आता है? आपको संस्कृत आती है? आपने कौन से शास्त्र पढ़े हैं और कहाँ पे ये लिखा है जो आप कह रहे हो?
Right.
WhatsApp is the new Shastra, Dharma Shastra. And I don't know if you have seen that web series called Patal Lok. There is one line which I like very much. It says that शास्त्रों में लिखा है पर मैंने WhatsApp पे पढ़ा है ऐसे. Right? So शास्त्रों में लिखा है मगर हमने WhatsApp पे पढ़ा है.
Like in this case, any religious text, like even if we talk about Quran, no, so we don't know what we are reading. Although we are reading it, but we and sometimes
Arabic सिर्फ memorization की भाषा है. उसका मतलब क्या है वो किसी को आता ही नहीं. इसलिए रट्टा लगाओ और बोल जाओ पोपट की तरह, पर भाई इसका मतलब समझाओ.
Yeah, like there are people who memorize the whole Quran, but I wonder if they know the meaning as well.
Most of the time they don't. So these are all politics of religion in all religions, not just Islam.
Yes, sir. This reminds me of a very like a line I read recently that all the religions all the religions claim to give inner peace, but there are very few people who exactly understand the religion.
And everybody claims to understand. That is not a problem. See, in my view, problem is not that only few people understand its meaning. My problem is that everybody thinks that they know the true meaning.
Yes, but then yeah. But there are like and there are just a few people who actually.
That is a bigger problem. Not knowing is, in my view, not a problem. To think that you know is biggest problem. Ignorance is okay, नहीं जानते हम लोग, but जानने का जो भ्रम है ना वो बहुत ही भयंकर होता है. Most of the politics revolves around that.
The power of refraction.
Power of
refraction.
Exactly. So refractions have such a power over culture from times immemorial, right? And yet we don't pay sufficient attention to them in our cultural studies. That's the complaint that Lefebvre makes. And this lack of attention comes from certain romantic ideas of genius. So Amar Chitrakatha and a mythological TV series has greater power than any literary text in India because it directly influences people's mind. Right? So mythological and historical TV series has immense power over people's minds, but we don't study it. सीधे दिमाग को हैक करने का तरीका रिफ्रैक्शन से दिमाग हैक होता है, राइट? And TV series is a very good example of that. Okay. So now what we are going to do, we are going to have presentations on this, right? From tomorrow onwards, right? So we will start with K. Krishnamurthy's essay first. It is shorter and it gives you overview of all important ideas in Sanskrit poetics. And this essay is very important if you want to appear for NET or SLET. Because many questions on in Sanskrit poetics come in NET SLET examinations. And I think that's why this is important. It is a very lucid essay, so I want somebody to take it up. Longish essay, Sanskrit literary culture from inside out, 2-3 log ले सकते हैं. Maybe 3 people can do it. On ancient Tamil poetics, 2 log कर सकते हैं. Sanskrit poetics, 2 log कर सकते हैं. And finally, towards an aesthetics of Dalit literature, ये भी 2 log कर सकते हैं. So I want your names in the same group. I'm not going to make a separate group for criticism paper. In core 11 के group में ही आप डाल देना कि कौन क्या कर रहा है. Right, so who is going for the first essay? Sanskrit poetics and overview. I want 2 people to volunteer. It's not a difficult essay at all. Difficult essay तो पहला है, Sanskrit literary culture. Okay, Rushi, and you can take one more person with you. Khadija,
Sir, I can do it.
Okay, Sanskrit poetics and overview, right? Tomorrow. Rushi and Khadija. Okay, who is going to then take up Sanskrit literary culture? Pollock कौन कर रहा है? 3 या 4 लोग कर सकते हो मिलके. But that's a kind of advanced knowledge. Okay. Rushi. Who else? Preeti. How about you? Preeti and Komal.
Yes, sir.
So you are going to make presentation on Sanskrit literary culture inside out along with Rushi and Komal. That will be next week, not this week.
Okay, sir.
Komal, is it okay? And if you feel,
Yes, sir.
You can also have one more person with you if you feel like it. Otherwise, I leave to 3 of you to decide. Right? Okay. On ancient Tamil poetics, A.K. Ramanujan. कौन करेगा? South Indians should jump into it. Ashok, Sohan. Are you awake?
Yes, sir.
Sohan, and
Yes, sir.
who else? You can take one more person with you.
Madhumita.
Okay, and Dalit aesthetics. Khadija.
Sir, I'm interested. Yes.
Yeah. Khadija and someone else. Can you hear me now? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I'm just repeating the presenters' names, right? First is Krishnamurti, Sanskrit Poetics. Rushi and Khadija are doing it. Pollock, Rushi, Preeti, and Komal. And I also suggest if Hamidova can take it up, she will enjoy it. So I leave it to you. But Rushi, Preeti, and Komal for Pollock, that will be next week. Ramanujan, Sohan, and someone else. And fourth is Dalit Aesthetics, Khadija Astha. Yeah.
Sir, is
So
Dalit literature one, the Dalit essay, is that a longish essay or?
not very long, but
Okay.
maybe few people
No,
can divide it.
actually, it's because Dehini might be interested in doing that, so I will ask her
Okay,
because
just
I think
ask
she's
her.
not
Yes,
in the.
perfectly fine. Perfectly fine.
Yes, because she's not in the lecture right now.
Right.
So
Right. You can ask her and sort that out.
okay, sir.
I'm
Thank
only
you.
looking for one more person to help Sohan with A.K. Ramanujan. Who will do that? Prutha, how about you? Prutha or Aditi? Aditi, will you team up with Sohan for A.K. Ramanujan?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. So that's taken care of for today. So we meet tomorrow then with the presentation on very basic essay, Sanskrit poetics. It's the basic kind of glossary of literary terms, जैसा है. Basic concepts सब समझा देते हैं. Right? Okay. So we meet tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Sir,
Yes.
can you send the compilation of essay once again in the group?
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Or if somebody has it already, then you can repost it in the group. Okay, so see you tomorrow then.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.